Welcome to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. Comment is the big conversation. It's the great debate, but it can only be either if I hear from you. The way to contact me is this. You can telephone and come on the show with me, 44-208-601-4555. You call us, we'll call you back, establish a clear line, and remember, if you get on the television with me, the volume on your television has to be down at 0, or I'll have to move swiftly on because no one will understand either of us. Or you can SMS the show on 447800008066, and it'll come up on the comment wall here. Or you can email me at comment@presstv.co.uk. This being the 21st century, you can even tweet me at comment_PressTV. Don't get a lot of tweets, but I've got a lot of viewers, more and more every week. In fact, now millions of people are watching Press TV online in Britain. Eat that, Ofcom. Now, we're discussing two important questions this evening. In a way, we deal with them every week. And we have to, because they continue to dominate the international political and news agenda. The first one is Iraq. The so-called ISIL, formerly ISIS, formerly Al-Qaeda, and in their wildest dreams now a new caliphate called the Islamic State, has been butchering its way across Syria and Iraq for the last few years. They specialize in cutting people's heads off. They execute people in cold blood. And they do so for no other reason than that those people are a different religion, or sometimes the same religion, but a different part of that religion. And sometimes the same religion and the same part of the religion, but just not ready to bow the knee to them. They butcher them in the most horrific fashion and in huge numbers as a kind of terror propaganda to terrify people into running away when they see them coming. And it worked. In June of this year, they swept across the west and north of Iraq. The Iraqi army ran away, refused to fight them, and just in the last week, the famed Kurdish Peshmerga did the same. They blamed the fact that ISIS or ISIL had superior weaponry and used it now as a lever to get a lot of brand new weaponry themselves from the United States and its allies. But the truth is that ISIL are, according to the BBC's defence and intelligence expert on Newsnight last night, between 10 and 20,000 men. Now, the truth is that an army of between 10 and 20,000 men, however good their Humvees are, is eminently beatable. But it will not be defeated by Britain and the United States. And when I saw on Newsnight the old experts being dragged out and the sand pit in the studio being, metaphorically in this case, examined. Why don't we do this? Why don't we arm those? Why don't we supply those? I scratched my head as an alternative to pulling my hair out because I don't have enough hair left to pull. These idiots who caused this catastrophe in Iraq in the first place have the sheer arrogance and sheer stupidity to imagine that they can be the people to resolve it. I've outlined here before, this is my view, it's not Press TV's view, it's not the view of any government, at least not that I know of, is that the only people who can fix Iraq's problems are, number one, Iraq, and number two, Iraq's neighbors. The last people in the entire world who are going to be able to fix the broken-backed state of Iraq are the people who broke its back in the first place. That's just my view. But the question I'm asking tonight is, why did the UK not deal with ISIL earlier? Well, there are many reasons. Again, this is just my own point of view. First of all, ISIL, when it was operating in Syria, was the UK's ally. In fact, William Hague, John McCain, and the other Cold War maniacs have been regularly meeting with the people who became the new so-called caliphate in all its absurdity. John McCain is even photographed sitting with the caliph, although he didn't look quite as he looks now. It's very definitely him. So the UK had a problem right at the start. ISIL were their allies in Syria. And if they'd stayed in Syria, this question would not have arisen. But once they were kicked out of Al-Qaeda for being too extreme, they came back into Iraq. And we're now told they have to be dealt with. But then they're not being dealt with. A couple of buzzes from a Tornado jet, a couple of airdrops of supplies to Yazidi refugees, who it turns out were no longer even there, does not a dealing with make. But there's a third and bigger question. Who are ISIL? Who's really behind ISIL? Did the United States and Britain want ISIL to sweep all before it? Did they want it to be at the gates of Baghdad so that they could get rid of al-Maliki? Now, I'm no fan of al-Maliki, but he was at least standing up to British and American diktat. He was, for example, buying weapons from Russia because the weapons he'd already paid for to the United States were not being delivered. Why did the US not supply the Iraqi army? Why did the US and the UK not ensure that the army they invented, set up, was capable of dealing with a threat like the one from the 10 to 20,000 fighters of ISIL? Was it because they actually wanted this fanatic, Takfiri, savage, barbaric, maniacal formation to prosper? Not prosper too much, but to prosper. Is this another example of having a tiger by the tail, which you discover when you've got it by the tail is called a tiger for a reason? So why did the UK not deal with ISIL earlier? You tell me what you think. And the second question, of course, is Gaza. This is the first day of an extended 5-day ceasefire. The Palestinian and Israeli negotiators have left Cairo. We don't know when they'll be coming back. What's going to happen at the end of the 5 days? Is this situation headed back to war, or is it going to be resolved around the negotiating table? I want your point of view. Ali is the first one up on the line. He's in Tehran. Ali, welcome to the show. Ali.
Good evening, sir, and God bless you.
Good evening to you, brother. Welcome to the show. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, first, I was thinking you deserve a Nobel Prize. But when I remember that this prize was given to a criminal like Begin and to a stupid like Anwar Sadat, I changed my mind. Anyway, well, the situation in the Middle East is unique. A group of European Zionists came to Palestine under an imperialistic plot and protection, occupied Palestine, threw the Palestinians out of their homes, where they were living for thousands of years, and when they refused to give up their land, they were massacred ruthlessly and are being massacred up to this moment. How can you change the borders with such funny justifications? And why Palestine off the map? Look at the map of the world in the 19th century and see how the borders used to be. Can you set the borders back to the 19th century? If Mexico claims on Texas, will anybody listen to Mexico? So how can you occupy a land and expel its people after thousands of years? What they call international agreement in the UN in 1948 is actually a conspiracy between the imperialist powers and their puppets. At that time, as you know, most countries from Asia to Latin America were under regimes that had been installed by the colonial powers. All that was bribery and conspiracy. Those who back the Zionists have the power and the money and the media, but the Palestinian refugees are struggling under an extremely unequal war to regain what was taken from them by force.
Yes, Ali, but Ali, the Palestinians are winning this war. Why do I say that? First of all, a guerrilla army just has to exist and resist in order to win. It just has to avoid losing, and it has not lost. The Palestinian people in Gaza have lost an ocean of blood. The Palestinian resistance was virtually untouched. 85% of the people killed by Israel in the last 5 weeks were civilian people, and most of those were women and children. 400 plus children were slaughtered by Israel in 5 weeks. I just saw a report, I don't know where it's drawing its figures from, but 700 women had miscarriages in Gaza during the bombardment of the last 5 weeks. The Palestinian civilian population has suffered greatly, but actually the military performance of the Palestinian resistance was exemplary. This is now being discussed openly in the Israeli media, in their military journals, on army radio, and in many other fora. The Palestinian resistance took a very high toll of the invaders, as is, of course, their legal and military right, their legal and moral right to militarily oppose and resist an invading force which is storming into their territory. And I say it for a second reason. Israel is bankrupt in international public opinion. Governments still move for them, of course, but not out of love. And they do so knowing that their own population is increasingly turning against Israel. Israel is utterly bankrupt and bereft of popular support in the world. And I have seen, since 1975, when I first became involved in the Palestinian cause, to 2014, so almost 40 years, I have seen a situation develop that I could never have believed. All over the world, in every city, every town, and every country, the kafia, the Palestinian flag, and the cause of Palestine is the cause of our era. And that's unbeatable. A resistance which can resist as the hammer and the anvil of boycott, disinvestment, sanctions, ostracism, shunning, not making welcome the citizens, goods, and services who support the Zionist apartheid state. Of course, there are some Israelis who are with us, but they are very small in number. That means they are amongst the bravest people on the earth. And if you ever see one, hug them, kiss them, embrace them, thank them. But they're only 4% of the population of Israel. Consistently, in the last 5 weeks, just 4% of the Israeli public thought that Netanyahu's war in Gaza was wrong. So hail the 4%, but have no illusions about the 95% who supported it. So I say boycott, boycott, boycott. Ali, thanks for the call. Patrick is on the line in England, in Doncaster. Patrick, welcome to the show. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, George.
Walaikum salam. Welcome. Go ahead.
The first thing is, in the situation in Gaza, the army abuse that we've seen on YouTube, that we've seen on Facebook, has been sent to the Bush and Blair Corporation and also sent to my MEP and MP, Linda McAvan and Caroline Flint, respectively. And I've asked for their specific comments on the contents of these videos. And rather than giving me their comments on the videos, they've allowed themselves to be distracted by the party line on the Palestinian issue. And maybe as a figure in the House of Commons, you can give me an illustration of the sort of supine spinelessness that we're dealing with, where MPs and elected officials refuse to condemn grandfathers and children being beaten by grown men with guns.
Well, that's a very powerful point that you make, Patrick. I wish I could tell you what Parliament feels about all this, but of course Parliament is on holiday again. I demanded right at the beginning of this crisis that the Speaker recall the House of Commons to discuss it. I received an acknowledgement that he would consider my request, but I have had no indication where that consideration has got to. So the MPs are on the beaches, all except me. I was in Parliament today, and I'm doing my second television programme of the day. I'm fighting every day and all day, but the others are on deck chairs on the beaches by and large. And the fault lies with us, really, not with them, Patrick. If they really felt that the people in Doncaster were boiling mad about what's happening in Gaza, they would soon jump too. But they don't feel that. And until they feel that, they will feel the hot breath of their leader on the back of their neck rather more keenly. Now, you're calling me from Doncaster. Doncaster is the parliamentary constituency of the man that we're told is the leader of the opposition. It took him 4 weeks to say anything at all about Gaza, and when he said what he said, he peppered it with no less than 11 declarations of love for Israel. He said 11 times, "I am a friend of Israel." The real question to Ed Miliband is, why are you a friend of Israel? Why would you want to be a friend of a country that behaves like that? Your father, your mother, who were Jews like you, were not friends of Israel. Why are you a friend of Israel? When did you become a friend of Israel? Was it when you thought that you might need the support of other friends of Israel in order to get votes or get money to get votes? When and why is the question we need to be asking. Ed Miliband, your MP, is the first British Prime Minister in the whole of British history to openly state, and I quote from the front page of the Jewish Chronicle, a Jewish newspaper in England, I'm quoting him, "I am a Zionist," unquote. Why, Ed? Patrick, what's your answer? Where is the situation headed?
Your point in the House of Commons, George, made very powerfully and very clear that if the humanitarian effort and if the international society, and it is a society, it's a society of collective people that care, the public obviously, if we don't do something, then it might be that the young people who feel so strongly, and I'm only 29, but I feel very strongly, will do the job for us. And that's what we don't want.
Well, Patrick, I have just sold out more than a week in advance 8 days before the show, I have sold 1,000 tickets at £12 each in Belfast to speak, amongst other things, about this. And by the way, I could have filled it twice, maybe more than twice. There are places where there is developing a critical mass of understanding and consciousness on this great matter, and we have to make that count everywhere. Patrick, thanks for the call. Let's go to Mohammed in South Wales. Why did the UK not deal with ISIL earlier, Mohammed?
Assalamu alaikum, George. How are you?
Walaikum salam. Very nice.
Nice to hear your voice again.
And you and yours.
Thank you very much. Well, basically, ISA is a, well, you know yourself, I know, everybody knows, is a puppet of the West. And basically, they use these kind of people, right, to press the community of Iraqi people and all over, and Syrian people, and they are funded. We don't hear anything about people who are funding these fanatic, crazy people. They, you know, every time I hear on, sometime I put my radio on and listen to BBC, and they always say Muslim state, the ISIL Islamic State. What they're trying to do is show to the Western community, the Western society, and especially the British society, that it's Islamic. It's not an Islamic state. There's no Islamic state at all.
It should never be described as that. They have declared this themselves. They are 10 to 20,000 people. The person who claims to be the caliph of all the Muslims in the world is a joke figure. And we should treat it as imposters. Absolute imposters. But Mohammed, they said on Newsnight last night that ISIL was in possession of $1.5 billion. Where could they possibly have got $1.5 billion? Let me go to Jordan. Abdul Karim is in Jordan. Welcome, Abdul Karim.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Go ahead.
Nice to join on the show again today.
Thank you. Go ahead.
From your question, why would the UK not attack the ISIL earlier? Of course, they are ashamed of what is going on, the truth of events. Because I could remember when the initial stage of the Syrian war, the Bashar al-Assad was crying out loud that this terrorist country attacking him, is not likely to support. And from what is going on in Iraq now, we have come to understand that these same moderate terrorists that the West describes and are trying to arm them during that time are the same Takfiris now in Iraq, carrying out all these vicious activities. So I think it's high time the West understand that they alone cannot solve the problem of the world. Okay, the neighbors of Iraq and Iraqi themselves are responsible to do this. Iran is willing to offer help all this while, but nobody's giving them a say. So the issue of them trying to carry out an airstrike now on the ISIL in Iraq is just a show game. It will never solve the problem because they created these monsters.
Brother, I'm going to cut you short because it's not a great line, but it was a good call. And I agree with that which I thought that I could garner from what you were saying on that poor line. I made it clear earlier what my own theory is. I don't actually know the answer to this question, but question it is. How come 10 to 20,000 people have $1.5 billion? How come they were able to sweep all before them in this military offensive? How come all these armies, Turkish, Saudi, American, British, the latter two who caused 1 million deaths in Iraq in order to make it fit for democracy, have sat on their hands whilst a group too extreme for Al-Qaeda took over half the country? They're at the gates of Baghdad. They're in control of Iraq's biggest reservoir. They're in control of oil fields. They're pumping oil. And they're making a lot of money. who are ISIL. Now, I'll be back, God willing, in just 3 minutes after a very short news bulletin. So please, don't go away. Come back for the second half of the show. Welcome back to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. You can call me, you can text me, you can email me, you can even tweet me. We're having calls from all over the world. But just before I go to the next of them, I want to just illustrate a point I made earlier. If you're on Twitter, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll already know this. But Israel is reduced to relying upon the support of the dregs of the earth. I'm talking about fascists, racists, ignorant fools who can't even speak or write the language they purport to be defending. The kind of people who defend Israel on Twitter, at least in this country, are so low that any decent person would be embarrassed to be found in their company. And I can tell, because as I'm blocking them, I look, that most of them are sad and pathetic lowlifes. One such is a very rich, but still lowlife, an American comedienne called Joan Rivers. This is what Joan Rivers had to say on television just the other day. Question, she said. A lot of people are upset that almost 2,000 Palestinians are dead. Joan Rivers. Oh my God, tell that to the people in Hiroshima. Good. Ask Colin Powell. When you declare war, you declare war. They started it. We now don't count who's dead. The dead deserve to be dead, said Joan Rivers. And then she said, they were told to get out. They didn't get out. You don't get out, you're an idiot. At least the ones that were killed were the ones with low IQs. That's the kind of people who are left standing at Israel's side. I'm confident Paddy in Ireland is not one of those, because the vast majority of people in Ireland long ago saw the truth of this matter. Paddy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Brother George.
Welcome. Go ahead, sir.
I'd first like to start off with congratulating you on your new addition to your family.
Thank you.
I hope he is blessed with a long life and a loud mouth like his father.
God willing. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, sir. I'd also like to offer my heart, thoughts and prayers to all of the people of Palestine, especially the people now that are suffering, the longest suffering occupied nation in the world. And I pray for them daily. George,
well done,
George, I'd like to address the issue of ISIL. There was a question on your board earlier with why did not the UK deal with ISIL earlier? Well, I think that is part of the problem, George. I think they were dealing with them far too early. They were dealing with them when they were in Syria.
Yeah.
They were selling them weapons, giving them money. Yeah. And then they were offering the media the opportunity to spread the propaganda of ISIL. So I'm sure you're aware of the bias of BBC, British Bias Corporation. And, well, RTE in Ireland is no better, let me assure you. The only true news I get is through the internet, through watching RT and Press TV. And God forbid now that's taken off the internet, and please God, it will not happen. I'd just like to make a point that ISIL or ISIS or whatever they call themselves, I don't know and I don't care what they call themselves, they're not Muslims or Christians or Jews. They're a dirty stain on the fabric of humanity. I hope the USA, the UK, the EU, the Saudis, the Qataris, and the other countries that support them are very proud of this, of fueling this pollutant that has scoured the decency of humanity on this planet that we call Earth.
Paddy, you're a brother from a different mother. I couldn't have put that better myself, and I hope to meet you soon in Ireland. Let's go to Paris, though, and talk to Franklin. Franklin in Paris, what do you think on the Iraq question? Go ahead.
Yeah, George, my problem is with Obama. You know, Obama was supporting the ISIL in Syria, fighting against Bashar al-Assad.
Yes.
But I'm very much surprised now why he's bombing in Iraq. That's a double standard game, you know. Obama is not fair to himself now. I'm not talking about the rest of the war. So it's very unfortunate. While we see England, France, they are all supporting ISIL. They are now supporting Iraq to fight against ISIL. But they were supporting ISIL in Syria to fight against Bashar al-Assad.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate.
This is the fundamental flaw, Franklin, in the Western policy. You can't give guns and money, as Paddy was just saying, to a group when they're in one country, but when they cross the border, really expect people to be fooled when you tell them that it's the end of the world and we have to reinvade it. Don't you think?
Very recently, Obama just said he's going to give ISIL 500 million United States dollars of arms and ammunition to fight against Bashar al-Assad. Now he's bombing them now in Syria. And another question is, Obama is very the civilians that are top up the mountain. But since almost 4 months now, the 200 girls that were kidnapped in Nigeria, we have not heard anything about the Obama government in rescuing those children.
Oh, let's be fair. Let's be fair. Michelle held up a hashtag and then promptly forgot about it. Franklin, thanks for the call. I'm going to the United States now, to Michigan, to talk to Annie. Where is the situation headed in Gaza? Annie, what do you think?
Hi, George. Good to talk to you.
And
I'm living in the bastion of liberalism over here in Michigan.
Okay.
And just to give you some background, I was married to a Palestinian, and I lived in Syria for 3 years.
Okay.
When I see what's happening in Gaza, when I see these truces being called, it just seems that it's also part of Israel. Israel created Hamas, and it serves as a pretext to kill Palestinians in Gaza. I mean, Hamas could not exist without the permission of Israel anyway. So
Why do you say that? Why do you say that, Annie?
Because it just wouldn't happen. I mean, Israelis would not let that happen. I can't see their giving permission, as it were, to allow Hamas.
Well, Hamas doesn't need Israel's permission. It's a revolutionary resistance organization. I'm going to come back to the point in a minute, but I'll let you finish.
Is a counter to Fatah, you know, with Arafat. And it was a way of getting rid of Arafat and then supporting Hamas. But we're a part of it. We can control it, but we're going to show the world that we do have an enemy within, and we have to do something about it. So it sort of works as a pretext for Israel to get rid of the Palestinians. I have some proof, but I don't have 100% proof on that. But
well, let me top up the truth quotient here. I happen to know this story very well because I was there. It's not true that Israel created Hamas, but it is true that Israel helped to create the conditions for the emergence of Hamas by completely refusing to deal with Arafat and by refusing to give any justice to the Palestinian people. They made people lose faith in the Arab nationalist trend of Arafat. So the ground was more fertile for the growth of this Islamist group, a part of the Ikhwan Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood, which is what Hamas is. It's not true that Israel in any way inspired the creation of Hamas. But it is true that when Hamas was founded, Israel cleared the decks as far as they could to enable them to grow. I was, for example, many times in Gaza in 1980. In 1980, the PLO, the Arafat, and other organizations within the PLO were completely illegal. They were either in exile, they were in prison, they were in the graveyard, or they were deep underground. But the Islamist organizations were being given full cooperation by Israel, being allowed to move around, build schools, clinics, hospitals, have buses, have ambulances, and so on. So it's certainly the case that Israel wanted an organization like Hamas to emerge and get stronger in order that Arafat and the PLO would get weaker. But that does not in any way mean that Hamas now, today, is some kind of agent of Israel or requires a license and is given one, as you imply, by Israel. That's certainly not true. Hamas are a brave and resourceful revolutionary resistance organization. And if it were not for Hamas defending the Palestinian people on the ground in Gaza, then the Israelis would still have their settlements there. They would still have their armed forces there that I saw operating there over many years in so many ugly situations. Hamas is the leading force in the Palestinian resistance. They drove the Israeli occupier out of Gaza. And whenever the Israeli army returns to Gaza, they take a heavy toll on that invading force. So there was some truth in what you said. It just wasn't the whole truth, and it certainly wasn't nothing but the truth. Now let me say what I've said 10,000 times. I am not myself a supporter of Hamas, and I never have been. I have supported the Arafat line, now exemplified by Marwan Barghouti, the Mandela of the Palestinians, serving many years of imprisonment in an Israeli dungeon. I'm not a supporter of Hamas, but I cannot allow them to be misrepresented, indeed worse than misrepresented, without answering. Let's go to Tanzania and talk to Mustafa on Iraq. Mustafa, welcome.
Greetings to you, Mr. Galloway.
Greetings to you.
Greetings from my family and my friends too from here.
Thank you, sir.
And I appreciate your continued support for the oppressed people of the world.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Actually, the question that you asked about why UK has acted in so late in what it was supposed to do, the very fact, I feel, that the Western powers have started to so late clearly negates any positive or humanitarian intentions. Because if they had such intentions, then they would have worked much earlier. The question is then, why have they acted now? I feel one of the reasons is that they wish to hijack the situation in Iraq and steal the trophy of victory from the people of Iraq, if there would be any victory against the ISIS.
Mustafa, I think you make a strong point. I speak as someone who doesn't want the UK to have anything to do with Iraq. They can give a check to Oxfam if they like. The last people in the world who should be going back to Iraq are the United Kingdom and the United States of America. The local people can do this job if they are given the weapons, and which they've already paid for, by the way, given the tools and given the goodwill internationally that require. And if the local people need assistance, there is Iran, there is Turkey, there is even Saudi Arabia, just across Iraq's borders, who could handle this problem. But we are fools if we will David Cameron and Barack Obama to solve a problem that Britain and the United States made in the first place. Mustafa, in Tanzania, greetings to all my friends there. I've never been to Tanzania, but I know I have a lot of good friends there. Scott in Germany is on the line on the same subject. Scott, welcome.
A great honour to speak to you again.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Joan Rivers, what a disgrace, huh? She was never funny in the first place, so I hope she never, ever recovers from this, because that was
it's a truly shocking quote, isn't it? Scott, she said, at least the ones that were killed were the ones with low IQs.
Absolutely disgusting.
She said, we don't count the dead. The dead deserve to be dead. Oh, my God, tell that to the people in Hiroshima. Just how low can Israel's supporters go? I suppose would be a question, Scott.
How low can anybody go? I heard you talk a little bit about the criticism of the comments on Newsnight about tents to help, about what we can do to sort this out. I'm a British citizen, as you can hear, although I live in Germany.
Yeah.
But I have to say, the tents that have been put up there for the refugees are from Britain, and I'm actually quite proud of that. I haven't seen Germany, the country I live in, send anything. I haven't seen Belgium send anything, so I think we have to be applauded for that. My question is, talking about ISIL, their tactics recently have been absolutely horrific. And I actually believe that human beings are just the products of our experiences. My question to you is, what is driving normal human beings to do this? What's causing this? There must be a route to, not just to be angry, to actually go out there and behead other human beings.
There's more than one way. There's more than one way to behead another human being, of course. It's not any better to behead human beings with cruise missiles or with rockets and with missiles and shells. Lots of human beings have been beheaded by us, the UK and the US, over these last decade and more. So we oughtn't to get too precious about it. But this mindset shared by these savage fanatics who we were encouraging in Syria and now told we should be afraid of in Iraq. The mindset is one of terror. They wish to create terror and fear so that people will run away from them, so that with just 10 or 20,000 soldiers they can achieve military gains that ordinarily would have required hundreds of thousands of soldiers. So they're fighting a war of terror to make people flee and bow down before them. Scott, thanks a lot. Must go back to London. Talk to Shujat. Welcome, Shujat. Go ahead.
Hello there, George. How are you? Long time I haven't spoken to you.
And you, sir, go ahead.
I follow your program quite regularly, and I'm quite proud of what you do among sea of oppressors and racists and tyrants. You are a beacon. Definitely, I very much appreciate that, what you're doing.
Thank you.
But for the last 40 or 35, whatever number of years you're doing, and I'm really honored. But I got a question for you, George. Do you think just words and these demonstrations and placards and slogans will help the poor Palestinians? Aren't they too feeble and too weak to fight the might of the Zionist army? Shouldn't other countries, and in particular Iran and Hezbollah, help them more directly, more vociferously, forcibly, to overcome these Zionists? Otherwise, they'll keep on killing.
Yeah, this is 2 weeks in a row I've heard this. It's really a bit much. The only people who are helping them are Iran and Hezbollah. You may well say they should help them more, but they're the only two people who are helping them.
I appreciate that. I understand. I agree with that.
I'm glad you appreciate it, because the last guy last week didn't really appreciate it. The question is, where are the others? Where are these governments that are forever telling us how Sunni they are? Every single person in Gaza is either a Christian, a very small number, or a Sunni Muslim. All over the region, we have governments who tell us that they are the real deal, the genuine article. They're never done telling us how Sunni they are. But they're not lifting a finger to help the Sunnis in Gaza. The demonstrations are helping a great deal. The boycott campaign will help even more. We must do everything. We must support the resistance in Palestine, and we must create an international anvil of international solidarity and boycott, divestment, and sanctions in the world. And between that hammer and that anvil, the apartheid state can be defeated. Shujat, thanks. I'm going to Beirut now. Neruda is on the line in Beirut. Neruda, welcome.
Hello, George. Good evening.
Good evening to you. Go ahead, sir.
Well, this ISIL business, it really reminds me of Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge.
Yes, that's a good comparison.
When things got out of... Yeah, because, I mean, it's the same strategy. They wanted to limit the Russian influence from Vietnam and the Chinese influence with the monarchy. So they invented the Khmer Rouge, and the CIA came out.
They didn't invent it, but they used it. The Khmer Rouge was a homegrown phenomenon, but it achieved imperialist support even a decade after it had been driven from power. They were still sitting in the United Nations, recognized by Britain and the United States.
Yeah, but on the larger scale, George, I'd like to make a couple of points. I mean, I was reading today about this young British rapper, Abdul Majid Abdul Bari, whose father was extradited in 2011 for I don't know what. But anyway, I mean, why are these people still being allowed passports? Football hooligans aren't allowed passports. So if somebody has radical views and they're at the risk of, well, I mean, as soon as they book a ticket to Turkey, they should be questioned and have their passports taken away or apprehended at the airport and questioned. I mean, these people are committing murders and killing families. They're destroying communities. The Middle East has never been like this.
Well, look, Neruda, I don't know who you're talking about. I don't know who his father was. I don't know who he is. I doubt if he's committed murder, so we should make that clear. But these fanatics that are going to fight in this so-called jihad, not against the occupiers of Al-Aqsa, of course, but to go and murder Muslims and Christians and Yazidis and other minorities in Iraq and Syria, will be arrested when they come back. But in the beginning, they were encouraged to go there in the first place by the government, which now says we're very, very afraid of them. Let me go lastly to Meher in Buckinghamshire on the Iraq question. Meher, welcome.
Yes, salam alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Go ahead quickly, please.
Yes, few minutes. I'm great admirer of your character. I wanted to phone you many times. And quickly I'm going to tell that today's situation taking me back to Halabja matter. Why these people, what were they doing? These Western people doing what happened? They supplied the chemical weapon to Saddam to kill the Halabja people. Now, this is such a double standard, really. That's why I don't talk. So double standard. You remember that what did happen in Halabja?
Well, not only do I remember, I was the single British member of Parliament who turned up at the protest against what happened in Halabja. Many years later, all sorts of people would be wrapping themselves in the shrouds of Halabja, but none of them did at the time. And the United States government maintained for months after Halabja that it had been Iran which carried out this crime rather than Saddam Hussein's regime. So hypocrites, double standards, that's for sure. I just say to David Cameron, you'll rue the day that you conjured forth, brought to power and strength the ISIL. Next week, God willing, I'll be back. Join me.
Hello, if you just comment your name and the place you that number, and just make sure that your television volume's set to 0. So can you spell your name for me? Yeah, I know. You'll be directly put through. Just the phone number, and then we'll call you back. Comment.